This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everybody and welcome to Turf Talk Down Under. I'm Angie and this week we have a special guest. No Self ID in Queensland is her name, and clearly she's an anonymous account for good reason. And we are going to talk about the impending Self ID bill in Queensland and the recent submissions. Hi No Self ID.
Hi, how you going?
Yeah, good. I've been away with my kids for a few days, and I came back to a prominent trans rights activist from Brisbane with my profile photo as his profile photo. So that was interesting.
Old mate, if he can't beat you, he wants to join you.
That's right. He wants to wear my skin. It's kind of creepy. Yeah, and I'm old enough to be his mum, so it's a bit weird.
Yeah, I'm sure that he was singing "It Rubs the Lotion on Its Skin" to himself as he changed his profile picture.
Well, one of the women said, "Oh, it means you're famous," because you know how so many anonymous TERFs have pictures of other TERFs as their profile pics, and she goes, "Oh yeah." And I thought, you beauty, keep it up, Amy, because I also got I've been shadow banned for a while, and I also got some new followers thanks to Amy adopting my persona. So keep it up, mate.
Well, this is the hilarious thing. So it was like watching someone having a brain meltdown in real time, because someone actually notified me that he was using your picture. So I wasn't even the first to notice it, because I don't spend my time on his page, because why would I? So I called him out for having your picture as his profile picture, and then he changed it to my picture, and I was like, go for your life. If you want to spruik that there shouldn't be self-ID in Queensland and help my cause, power to you. Cheers, bro. It's not my picture, whatever. And so I'd called him out for having your picture, and then another user, Gina, called him out for having my picture. So then he changed it to her picture, and it was happening like quite rapidly. And it was like, what you doing, Amy? Are you okay day just for you, Amy? It was just very weird, and I'm unsure what he was trying to achieve. And then he was just like doing little caps lock replies. I think, like, I'll talk about it with you later, but I think he was just having a little hysterical tantrum because his bestie did a really shit job at the parliamentary committee hearing. Like, it was actually laughable what is, I would say, little friend, but that man is a giant.
Oh, is that the giant that was supposedly representing a org that represents incarcerated women? Is that him?
Oh yeah, wait till I tell you about his presentation, such that it was. Yeah, so I think Amy was just having a little foot stamp, little throw his toys out of the pram, because his friend did such a pathetic job at the parliamentary committee hearing, and he was gonna tell those meanie TERFs not to be mean to his friend. So
I wasn't even here for it. Oh well.
That was the best part, and I could tell that he was just looking for attention. So I was like, yeah, okay, have fun changing your display pic, I guess. Like, cool. It's a matter for you, buddy. Although he didn't even try putting like Sal Grover's picture or anything. No. He went straight for you, Ange. Maybe you're the high priestess of TERFs in Australia. Maybe it's you.
Oh no. Him and Katie Montgomery did a full hour and a bit long video on Sal Grover and I one day, and it was so boring we couldn't even sit through it to listen to it.
Oh, so it wasn't even like funny to make fun of or anything like that?
Well, for the first 5 minutes, and then it just got really tedious with them all checking their appearance like this.
And he's a teacher at QUT. Can you imagine trying to sit through one of his classes?
Yeah, I just thought he was.
He's a fine arts teacher at Queensland University of Technology, and he puts that on his Twitter profile. So I assume by that Queensland University of Technology endorses everything he says, right? Because he hasn't put a disclaimer that his tweets are personal and that they are not representative of Queensland University of Technology. So draw conclusions from that you will.
I describe him as the boy who never left school, because that's what he is to me. He's a young man who's gone to school and gone to university and never left. So, he's sort of got the emotional age of a child who's never left school, and he's a fully fledged adult. So
not to mention the likely porn addling effects on his little brain.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
let's
I always
talk.
try and block that bit out, but it is really important, you know, that. And
Yeah.
apparently someone made a submission to the self ID thing and talked about autogynephiles, and that was heavily edited before it was released to the public. Because
Wait, the one from the
yes,
autogynephile? Because there was an
no,
actual autogynephile who wrote a submission.
yeah, it's a shame that he didn't get asked to speak,
Yeah,
because that was
imagine.
close to the bone.
Oh,
But
that would
there
have
was
been amazing.
actually a submission that talked about autogynephilia with photos and details, and that was heavily edited because what was shared was so disturbing that the Queensland public didn't have the right to know, or that was the logic behind it.
What?
Well, basically, they don't want Queensland people to know what an autogynephile is, because then they will recognise that 95% of trans-identifying men are autogynephiles who have been fueled by porn. So,
oh my God, that's horrific. Well, in today's news of things that make you want to just burn down the internet to rubble, I have a tweet that someone sent me of someone who says, children can't be pedophiles, trans age kids are kids. And honestly, the guff that I heard at the parliamentary committee hearing about how trans women are women and they need to be in all female spaces, I just can't see how trans age kids are kids is not going to be the next thing to happen, and how it actually won't be accepted.
yeah,
Because the level of insanity of the trans right activist submissions at the hearing makes me think, yep, probably it's pedophiles next.
yeah. I started listening to the submissions, and I actually found it so disturbing that I had to stop listening. And I rarely get triggered about, you know, old bad things that have happened to me in the past, but listening to the gaslighting and women being lied to, women being openly lied to and expected to believe that, you know, men are not potential predators, I just couldn't handle it, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's understandable.
Yeah, I couldn't handle it. And that's not like me. Normally I can sit through the most horrific things. I mean, I am active on Twitter, but hearing it from politicians who should know better, demanding that we accept men are women in all circumstances, solely on the basis of them self-declaring, was so offensive to me.
And here's
Because
what I didn't get is that I thought naively, I'll accept that, naively, thought that there would be a kind of accepted standard for the hearing, which would be neutrality.
Yeah.
And there was not neutrality, because a lot of the language used by the committee members, number one, they didn't set boundaries at the start for what language committee members would use, which should have been the case. They should have said, like, basically, here's a glossary of terms that we're going to use at this hearing, and here's the meaning we are going to use for each of these words for clarity at the beginning. That's absolutely what they should have said. The fact that all throughout committee members were mixing up sex and gender, conflating them, saying that they were different one minute, using gender when they meant sex the next. The fact that they were using trans rights ideology language just as the way to refer to somebody. And the fact that all throughout the hearing, and this is what made me livid, the trans right activists, and I'm using that to mean basically anyone who turned up speaking in favour of the bill, because that's essentially what they were doing. They were doing it from a trans rights perspective. They came with these emotive stories about, you know, my poor friend who is a trans woman and just wants to have female so that when she goes for a bank account, she isn't outed. And it's like, who the fuck gives a shit at the bank whether or not you are a man or a woman? They don't care. They just want to hold your money. Anyway, it was all this emotional stuff. There were all these horrific untruths spilled about you have to affirm trans kids, and the best way to affirm them is with their birth certificate. And if you don't, they're going to kill themselves. And you have to affirm trans adults, and it has to be on their birth certificate, because if you don't, you're causing them a trauma, blah, blah, blah. None of that. The committee did not ask for any evidence of those claims being true. They did not say, where's your peer-reviewed evidence for any of those claims. Sal Grover and Rachel Wong from Women's Forum Australia get up and say something as fucking obvious as men perpetrate violence against women, and the committee asked them for a peer-reviewed study proving that. Like, are you actually fucking kidding me? But the best, like, okay, so I don't know what kind of format you want to go with there, because I'm just kind of rattling off all the stuff that made me happy and made me angry all in one go. But the best part was that they tried to pull the where's your peer-reviewed evidence card out for Sal and Rachel, and Sal had the fucking stats. And she reeled out the stats. She'd memorized them, and she went, this many number, this many number. And it was about the number of males in female prisons in Queensland for the last 3 years. And it culminated with her saying that it will be at the point this year where 10% of incarcerated people in women's jails will be men. 10%.
That's horrific.
But she had those stats. So it was like, but then it was like, oh, this is not peer reviewed. It's like, no, it's just counting. You don't, like, it's counting. Anyway, so the committee was interesting. It was a mixed bag. So old mate, chair of the committee, I've forgotten his name, but he was basically just like, he clearly had no idea about any of these issues. And at one point I heard him say to everyone in the room, thanks guys. And I was like, ooh, misgendering the trans woman. You called him a guy. Oh no, the misgendering. The deputy chair was MP Laura Gerber, and she was excellent. So she's LNP, she's smart as a whip, and the questions that she was asking were the questions that really mattered. And it was a real shame, because I could tell that she was trying to throw a ball to biologist Professor Koopman at one point, but old mate dropped it, which was unfortunate, because she said to him, why do we have biological sex on birth certificates? And I think she was looking for him to give, from a biological perspective, the difference between males and females, and why it is important that everyone knows whether you're a man or a woman. But he just said, I don't know. Why do we? Maybe we don't need it on there. And it's like, oh, no, buddy. She threw you a ball and you fumbled it. I think he got a little...
Only a man would answer that.
Well, he seemed to just be not very confident about why he was even there. And it was like, oh, you should have stayed home. We should have just had Professor Parkinson, and then Fond of Beatles from Twitter should have just been video linked in to be the biologist for the day. Emma Hilton, absolute badass biologist. She would have been able to answer why we put people's sex on their birth certificate. But anyway,
I think any woman could possibly answer that question.
Or yeah.
Any decent, any most reasonable medical professional.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous that he couldn't answer that.
Yeah. And then so Laura Gerber was fantastic. She was one who even asked one of the trans rights presenters about, because so this was really interesting to me. So in the act, or in the bill that's that they're going to try and pass, it says that if a man changes his birth certificate to say female, he then gets to be afforded all the rights of females for the purposes of anti-discrimination. So he could be discriminated against on the basis of him being of the female sex, not possessing a womanly feels gender identity, like he currently can do with the Anti-Discrimination Act, but on the basis of him literally being of the female sex, that is part of the bill. And that is fucking crazy. And that's the furthest that any legislation in Australia has even gone with self-ID. See, I thought that they were going to bury that. But someone on the committee explicitly said that at the hearing. And I was like, holy shit, you're saying the quiet part out loud. Because I think a lot of people were like, well, yeah, but, you know, exemptions, Anti-Discrimination Act, they won't be like literally female like in law, because that's just silly and crazy pants. But they said it. They said they will be of the female sex for the purposes of anti-discrimination.
Yeah, so that means that they have the protection of sex, our sex,
yep,
and also the protections of gender identity.
Yep.
So if there is a sexual harassment claim in a workplace and the trans woman harasses a female will claim sexual harassment on the basis of sex, and he'll say, oh, no, you're harassing me because I'm trans.
Yeah. It's a catch-22. It's absurd. And so MP Laura Gerber actually asked she asked one of the TRA groups, some dickhead, are you supportive of the fact that that will transfer over to things like female sporting clubs and games and things? And whoever she asked was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. So that was ridiculous. Sandy Bolton was a mixed bag. She's the independent member for Noosa. She had some good questions, and you could tell that there was a little voice in her head. Maybe it sounds a bit like you, Ange, saying this whole thing is bullshit. But she came up with this really wacky idea. I don't know if it just occurred to her, if it had been brewing for a while. She came up with this idea that that birth certificates would stay as they are, but become confidential documents. And then everyone would have to have a gender identity certificate. And that would be used as your ID document to get your driver's license, buy a house, like as your ID. And I thought that is exactly the same as making everyone have a christening certificate, because I don't believe in God and I don't believe in gender identity. Yeah. You can't force me to elect a gender identity and then have that document be my most compelling form of identification going about my life. That is absolutely insane. So I think she hadn't thought it through, and that she thought that maybe people who were opposed to the bill were just like really protective of the piece of paper that is a birth certificate, as opposed to what powers it has. And she was like, oh, well, we can protect the piece of paper, and then we'll just have a different piece of paper, and that'll actually have all the same power. And it's like, no, it's not just the piece of paper, it's the power that comes with the piece of paper, the rights and powers and privileges that come with the piece of paper. So Sandy went a bit off script and weird, but you'll love this. I can't wait to see your face. So there was this Bell End MP called Jason Hunt, and he did not like Sal and Rachel, and he struck me as the kind of man who has skin in this game in some way, and you can decide what kind of skin he perhaps has in this game when I tell you this little story. So the filming of the hearing is only of whoever is speaking at the time, so you can only see like the speakers who had come to give submissions or the member of the committee who's speaking. But when Sal mentioned autogynephiles for the first time at the hearing, it was the first time the word had been mentioned, Jason, who was video conferenced in for it, threw his hands up and walked away from his camera. Check his hard drive, check his wardrobe. That's all I'm going to say.
Either he is one or he's protecting someone who is one.
Yeah. That would be one interpretation of that particular bit of behavior, and also the absolute bile he was spitting at Sal and Rachel. He told them 3 times that they had to provide peer-reviewed evidence that males cause harm to females when they are in female spaces. And
what peer-reviewed evidence?
I think old
Specifically?
mate. Well, I think old mate just read it somewhere and thought it sounded a bit cool, because he said, well, you've got media reports and you've got news articles, but where's your peer-reviewed evidence? It's like, so if a woman's raped and it's reported in the news, but her rape wasn't peer-reviewed, she wasn't raped. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if anyone's ever peer-reviewed a woman's rape, but I'm kind of guessing not. And I'm kind of guessing that if you wanted to do a peer-reviewed study of rape where you got a bunch of women together and only raped half of them so that the unraped women would be the control group, no ethics committee would consent to that. Pretty sure you wouldn't get that one through. So he was just very, very negative and cranky with Sal and Rachel. And then when he actually threw his hands up and walked away from his camera at the mention of autogynephile, I was like, ooh, buddy has skin in the game. Interesting. Not to mention just bloody unprofessional to walk away from a speaker at a parliamentary committee hearing. It's like, we can see you. You are on camera. Like,
who is he the MP for? Like, what party? Dare I ask?
Labor.
Oh.
Yeah. So Sandy Bolton is independent. He's like, oh, Jonty Bush was bloody there, and she was just lapping up the TRAs, and she was not a happy camper about Sal and Rachel either. So I think she's just handmaiden territory. So there was the chair who didn't seem to know what was going on. There was Laura Gerber, who has a brain. There was old mate Jason throw his hands up, walk away. There was Sandy, why don't we just have a whole new certificate and make everyone sign up to a religion they don't believe in? And then there was Jonty the handmaiden. And then there was some random guy next to Laura Gerber who just didn't speak the whole time, and who cares? I think he was just there because they needed someone to sit there. So, but so Patrick Parkinson was the first speaker. He's a emeritus professor of law at University of Queensland, and he was fantastic. He was so great at his mix of measured, logical, rational, and enough emotion in his voice to not make it dry. And I actually think that the fact that he's a privileged old white man is very good for our cause, because he has no skin in this game. Like, he's a privileged old white man. I don't think he teaches at UQ anymore. He could have just float away into retirement and go play golf every day, but he cares enough about women and girls, and his whole submission was about protecting the sex-based rights of women and girls. And he cares, and he doesn't have to. And it's like, it's, to a lesser extent than J.K. Rowling, but it's like, J.K. Rowling, she could have just done a Suzanne Gilmore, written her books and gone off to live in the woods. That's actually what Suzanne Gilmore, the author of the Hunger Games, did. She literally released the Hunger Games trilogy, got her money, and fucked off to the woods, and has never been heard from again. And so I think that it's wonderful when people care who you expect to care, but the people who have no skin in the game and could very well just ignore it all but still stick their necks out, I think those people are really special. So yeah. And then so there was the Multicultural Australia, and I hadn't read their submission because I didn't have time, but I had some hopes for them, because I was like, oh, maybe they'll talk about the rights of Muslim and Orthodox Jewish and other women from cultural backgrounds who can't have males in their single-sex female spaces. And, naive me, I thought that would be a possibility. Oh no, it was her whole, Multicultural Australia's whole speech was just about some trans woman from Iran who came to Australia and is not traumatized by being a gay man in Iran. No, that's fine. All the atrocities perpetrated against him, that pales in comparison to not having female on his birth certificate. That's his real trauma. That's traumatic. The number of times I heard the word trauma was traumatic for me. I was like, seriously, you come from Iran where you're actually like, where they have a history of basically holding gay men down and cutting their dicks off and saying, look, you're a woman now, to punish them for being gay. And a little piece of paper that you hardly ever use, but that confers your rights, traumatizes you because it doesn't say female. Really?
Well, for most of the people who made submissions from the other side, were they mostly youngish people? Like,
Nah.
you know, really?
Mixed bag. There was like this poor woman who was from the LGBTIQ alphabet soup legal service, and she was all like, oh, the poor trans, blah, blah. It's so traumatic when you fill out a tenancy application and have to tick the little box that says man when you don't feel like one. And it's like, yeah,
you know what's true?
whatever.
You know, when I was a tenant many years ago now, when I was a tenant, it filled me with dread to tick the fact that I was a single parent, because there was genuine discrimination against single parents renting properties.
Exactly.
So it filled me with absolute dread, and I could have easily identified as a married woman or whatever, and I didn't. I just said, right, you know, and I must have missed out on like 50 properties.
Yeah,
it's part of life. Rejection is part of life. People looking at you and raising an eyebrow about something, you know, is part of life. You know, like, they're just so precious.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah.
You know, it's when you're a parent and you're not, you know, and you're unmarried and you've got your maiden name, you know, we still get eyebrows. I still get eyebrows raised because I never married, because I'm anti-marriage.
How dare you?
And they're like, but you've got 4 children. And I'm like, fuck off, you know, like, it doesn't,
like,
it
but
doesn't
you know,
emotionally wound me. You know,
it's like they think that the lack of wedding ring is a form of contraception.
well, yeah, of course.
Like, you can't actually have sex unless there's a wedding ring on. It's like, no, you can. It's perfectly possible.
But it's you know, it's like, if I had every slight that I've ever received in my life because of some, you know, significant thing like my marital status or my sex or whatever, if every single slight that I ever had in my life, or every assumption that someone had made that I was of the opposite sex, then, you know, I'd be like on the ground or something. Like, they overreact to absolutely everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Know?
Just the number of times that I heard, applying for a bank account, you're outed applying for a bank account. You know what happens when you apply for a bank account most of the time these days? You do it online. No one's even looking at it because it's computerized.
And if you're a single person, you're more likely to get a bank account no matter what sex you are, or or what gender you identify as, than you are if you have dependents. So there's another big hullabaloo that they're making about you know, how disadvantaged they are, when women are disadvantaged by the fact that most of us are the ones who have sole care of dependents.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like everything they do, women can turn around and say, but hang on, we face the same discrimination.
Or worse, because we are actually women.
We are actually female, yeah. So it proves that they're men.
Exactly.
Well, they're men.
So there was this trans man named Jeremy Wiggins who turned up.
I know Jeremy. I'm familiar with Jeremy.
Yeah, so Jeremy rocked up to the hearing, and his whole evidence was not peer reviewed, Ange, but that didn't matter because he was there for the TRA side. He was asked a question by the committee. I don't remember what it was because it was so boring. And his response was, I asked a young person and they told me. And I was like, so why does Jeremy get to say, I asked a young person, but Sal doesn't get to say this many men in women's prisons, because that's not peer reviewed? Like, the fucking bias and double standards was just horrific. But it was one of those things I couldn't decide what the biggest low point was, because so in Brisbane there's a suburb called Darra. At Fernwood Darra, 90% of the women who attend, so Fernwood, for anyone who doesn't know, is a female-only gym. 90% of the attendees at Fernwood Darra are Muslim women. And if there ever has to be a man come into the building for, you know, maintenance or anything like that, There's a warning issued over the loudspeaker half an hour before he arrives in case any women need to finish up and go. And then there's the warning when he does arrive, and then he's actually escorted around by a female staff member. They're incredibly respectful of their gym members. And Multicultural Australia did not mention that once. They turned up with the story of the bloke from Iran, and that was all they had. They didn't mention the Muslim women. And also, like, just from a business perspective, what the fuck is Fernwood going to do when they start getting men joining their gym? That business just will lose 90% of its clientele.
Yeah,
that's great. It'll fold, or it'll just become a Cox in Frocks gym. Like, ridiculous. And so there was just no concern for women from cultural backgrounds that are required by their culture and or religion to maintain single sex spaces for certain activities that make them able to enjoy a healthy lifestyle. Like, just the fact that all Multicultural Australia could do was rock up with a story about a man, I was just like, fuck you. You are not Multicultural Australia. You are Penis Australia. Just call yourself that and stop messing around. Like, it was, and speaking of people who turned up not doing what it says on the packet, Sisters Inside, I'm going to read this to you. This is from the Sisters Inside website. Established in 1992, Sisters Inside is an independent community organisation based in Queensland which advocates for the collective human rights of women and girls in prison and their families and provides services to address their individual needs. The word trans was used more by the two speakers from Sisters Inside than the word women. So Sisters Inside, like, you know, everyone knew that it was going to be a bloody shit fight when they saw the names of the two representatives that were sent, because one of them is an enormous man. Like, he's just actually a behemoth. And
sorry, was he the one that led the chant through the Brisbane streets that demanded men have entry to, was it domestic violence services? And places like that, prisons.
And he looked fucking terrifying, because he marched down the street with his megaphone wearing camouflage and massive combat boots, shouting about men's rights. It was very weird and scary.
I'll try and put the footage in the comments, because he says the words, you know, trans women in domestic violence and crisis services or something like that. And the image, just imagining him in any female-only space, let alone a crisis service, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. So he rocked up to speak on behalf of Sisters Inside. He and some handmaiden whose name escapes me. But it was so weird, because they rock up purporting to represent an organization called Sisters Inside, and they said hardly anything at all about women unless it was trans women. So their whole, and it was very, very strange, because not only was what they were saying just nonsense, it sounded like if you put Judith Butler at a hearing and made her talk, because it was all this really convoluted, just random, garbled, vaguely academic but not really language. And they made some really out there claims that I was like, fuck, if the committee had just dug in a bit and gone, hold on a minute, did you actually just say that every single, and they kept saying person in prison, not women and girls, but person in prison. It's like, but your Sisters Inside, your whole shtick per your website is you're meant to be about women and girls, not people in prison, persons in prison. Anyway, they actually at one point said that every single person incarcerated in Queensland is raped by correctional staff. And I was like, that seems very unlikely. And the committee did not ask for a peer review of that claim.
Really? I would be asking Corrections Queensland about that.
It seems really unlikely. I think if every single incarcerated person, so even the old pedophiles at Walston Correctional Centre, which is 60% child sex offenders, so every single person incarcerated in Queensland has been raped by correctional staff, number one, the correctional staff would be very busy, surely. They would be having time to do anything else if they were running around after murderers all day trying to rape them. But it also seems like that's the kind of thing that would have made the news if it were true. So that was just a weird little sidebar. But all they kept saying was lived experience, lived experience, lived experience. And the committee, like different members of the committee, asked them 5 times what their position on the bill, the actual self-ID bill, what their position was. And they couldn't tell the committee. So it went like this. The committee said, so what is your position on the bill? And big man or his handmaid sidekick would say, trans folks lived experience. Yeah, okay, but what is your position on the bill? Trans folks lived experience. Yeah, the bill. Trans folks lived experience. Like it literally was that bizarre of they would just say over and over, lived experience should be the primary consideration in identifying trans people. It's like, but what does that mean? Number one, what does that mean? Number two, what the fuck does it mean in the context of this bill? Like it was truly bizarre. That's why I think the little TRA had a tantrum and went a bit bizarre yesterday with using different display pictures, because he was like, oh no, my friends have done the bad, stupid thing.
When they don't have an argument, they always resort to all that, that what we call butler speak, where they go through, they just go through the Roman scroll of cliches that they fire at you, like trans women are women, or, trans lives matter, or bigot, whatever. But it's almost, when you put them on the spot, it's almost like that religious speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
Like
I would recommend watching I would recommend watching their part of the hearing just so that you can have the what the fuck moment that all of us were treated to. Because it was just like, what do you even say? Like, it was bizarre. So, because there was a lot of really offensive shit said by other TRA presenters about, if you don't change a child's sex on their birth certificate, they'll kill themselves. That's just abhorrent and incorrect and horrific. Correct. But the man and his handmaiden from Sisters Inside, they didn't even say anything particularly outlandish, only because what they were saying didn't make enough sense to even be outlandish. It was really weird, super, super, super weird. It was literally like they just had a Judith Butler book open and were just reading like random pages from it. It was bizarre.
The most marginalised women are Indigenous women in prison.
30% of incarcerated women in Queensland are Indigenous, which means that this self-ID bill will harm Indigenous women more than anyone.
Yes. And they have very clear, cultural needs regarding men's business and women's business, which have been completely disregarded.
Yeah.
And also, these women are in there for generally more minor crimes.
Yeah.
And they're being put in with men who are there for far more serious crimes.
Yep, exactly.
It's horrific. And these, agencies that are supposed to represent them, are completely captured and promoting the interests of the porn sick white man. It's just horrific.
So speaking of porn sick white man, so the man who presented on behalf of Sisters Inside, he held a fundraiser for his fake breast surgery, and the CEO of Sisters Inside emceed that fundraiser. He put it all over his Instagram, and then he put up a photo of him in recovery from his surgery, looking down at my massive titties. So that's what the CEO of Sisters Inside spends their time doing. Yeah, it's just great.
He'd be a lovely bloke to be in a jail cell with his massive titties, wouldn't he? You'd feel really comfortable, undressing in front of him and having a shower.
Yeah.
Even eating a meal next to someone who refers to his, his fake man boobs as massive titties.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's not a porn sick thing at all, is it, Ange?
Definitely not at all.
Definitely not. He the funny thing about him was that his surname, the committee mispronounced a couple of names. Like they accidentally called the committee chair called Sal Grover Sal Glover, which was just stupid. But the committee chair also I think twice accidentally referred to the man from Sisters Inside, pronounced his surname broccoli, like the vegetable, when I think it's actually brocky or something like that. He was like, and and Nico Broccoli is gonna blah blah blah. It's like, oh no, not the broccoli man. Save us from the broccoli man. But yeah, Sal and Rachel were phenomenal. So not only Rachel was basically when Rach started speaking, she turned up after the last like 5 presenters were TRAs.
Ooh.
Rachel turned up and it was like the grown-ups had finally arrived. So she just was so calm and logical and just stepped through all these things. And the moment she said trans women are biological men, I was like, fuck yeah, Hansard. That is in Hansard, recorded forever. And then she just stepped it through. She was just fantastic. And her whole focus was on, this isn't even about transgender people. This is about the predatory men who will exploit the living shit out of this. Although, of course, she didn't say shit because Rachel's a much more eloquently spoken person than I am. I'm just a bit of a garbage fire. But but yeah, and then so the funny thing was Sal was not invited to speak, but but Rachel was allowed to bring a witness, and witnesses, I read the rules of the hearing. Witnesses are not allowed to speak in the 5-minute opening address, but they are allowed to speak after that. And Sal was fire. She was amazing. I just it was really emotional watching, as soon as Rachel started talking and just the way that she was so beautifully standing up for women and girls, I started getting emotional. I had to wipe tears away, because when you know how important this is and you see a woman in her element who knows this shit inside and out and has managed to actually control the rage to be assertive and rational and intelligent and just spot on with all her words, it just blows you away and you can't help but feeling emotional. And then Sal made me cry again because she was just pure fire, and it was just, oh my goodness, it was just amazing.
Did you hear Sal on Ben Fordham's show, Fordham's show the other day?
I have to listen to it. It's on my to-do list.
Yeah, she was on the radio and it was just bang, and she just put it all out there, and it was really good to hear someone, one of us on a mainstream radio program just telling it like it is and using the plain language, which is so important.
Yeah, exactly. And then so right after Sal and Rachel, there was Kat Karina, and she spoke about the fact that if her whole perspective was about parents transing their kids, basically. And she made a really good point that the committee in their opening had referenced that this had all come about because of following the Yogyakarta principles. And Kat was like, Australia's not signed up to that, but we are signed up to the United Nations, which has released a statement that self-ID is wrong. And
has it? How did I miss that?
Wow. So she was like, so how about following that, everyone? Anyway, so she made some really great points as well about the fact of social transition is not benign, was basically where she was coming from, and that it's the first step on a horrific staircase that doesn't lead anywhere good. So that was really powerful as well. So, and then after her there was the Christian schools. So the Christian Schools Alliance, I think they're called, and they were mainly speaking on behalf of, there's a group of all girls schools in Brisbane for girls who are classified as disengaged from education. It's basically the last hope of education for these girls. And a lot of them have come from backgrounds of real trauma, not piece of paper trauma, but sexual assault and coercive control and actual trauma. And talking about the necessity of maintaining their schools as single-sex schools. There's 5 different campuses throughout Brisbane. And Jason Hunt, the man triggered by AGP being mentioned, thought that he had a little gotcha, because he was like, oh, but are there any male staff members at the school? And the man who came to speak on behalf of the school was like, there are 2. One of them is a maintenance man. The other is an English teacher. Both of them are older men who take on kind of a grandfatherly disposition, but there's a female youth worker who can accompany any girls into class with the English teacher to sit with them if needed. And all I wanted to do was say, the maintenance man and the English teacher wouldn't be getting changed with the girls. They wouldn't be going into the girls' toilets. Like, it's not the fucking same as a 17-year-old boy trying to enroll in the school and rocking out and being in the toilets with the grade 8, 13-year-old girls. Like, having the gardener is not the same as having a guy in the fucking girls' toilets and the change rooms and doing the swimming carnival and going on overnight camps in the same tent. Oh my God, Jason Hunt made me so mad.
It was a Queensland MP that's calling to the immigration department to block Kelly J's visa to come out for her tour. What is it with these young male Queensland MPs?
Well, this guy wasn't particularly young. He looked like, by his video, it looks like he's in his 50s. Like, he's not got the early 20s Wokey McWokerson kind of excuse.
They're still like, who do they think they are that can speak for women and to speak about women's privacy and safety? Who the hell do they think they are? But they all feel entitled to demand that we women concede that men are also women. And when we say no, they get hysterical. I can't say that on
hysterical.
They do. They get hysterical, and they get offended, and they get over the top.
And the fact that Jason Hunt seemed to think he had a gotcha to be like, ooh, but are there any male stuff? And it's like, that was my whole.
There was,
it was just, and it was so weird. I was like, why are you trying to like play a gotcha? You're a member of the committee. Like, where's your neutrality and professionalism, you weirdo? Like, calm down.
Funny. It used to be blokes who were like in the centre or on the right that used to do the what about men.
Yeah.
But that's now been replaced with what about trans women from men on the left.
Exactly. Well, so after him, I had a very, very, very weird experience of nodding along with the Australian Christian lobby. I don't think I've ever found myself nodding along with anything they've ever said, but credit to them. Ross, I think his name is Ross Norman, showed up to speak, and he credited feminists. He actually said feminists have been trying to raise the alarm about this for years and no one is listening to them, and they are right. And I was like, okay, I'm nodding along with the Australian Christian lobby. This is very weird. Like, weird for me being an atheist and also pro-choice, but it was just bizarre to be listening to the Australian Christian lobby standing up for sex-based rights of women and girls and crediting feminists for all their hard work. I was like, okay, this is a weird day. I hate Sisters Inside and I love the Australian Christian lobby just for today.
But back when I was young, all the feminists ran a lot of the grassroots services for women, but the other people that were running them were Christian women.
Yeah.
And they weren't doing it to indoctrinate people into their church. It was part of their Christian charity.
Yeah.
And it's really funny that here we are side by side again, helping out the most disadvantaged women, standing up for the most disadvantaged women, like the ones in jail, the ones in crisis services, homeless women. It's feminists and Christian women. Like, here we are. We've gone back 40 years.
Yeah.
But at least we have each other. That's what I'm going to, that's my position on it, is that thank God that there's at least 2 lots of people fighting for the rights of women, because the majority people certainly aren't. They're either indifferent, oblivious, or actively trying to destroy our sex-based rights.
Exactly. And the thing that I really appreciated was the fact that he did credit feminists, because the thing is, we can disagree on abortion. Feminists and the Australian Christian lobby can be completely opposed on abortion. That is as it is. But it's fantastic to be able to come together on something that we agree on.
Yeah.
And to be able to embrace that nuance and that grey area, and not just say, oh, there's, you know, can't even credit the feminists at all because they're the baby killers, but to actually have the maturity. So power to you, Australian Christian lobby. If you're listening, I'm sure you watch Turf Talk Down Under every week with your cup of tea. But Ross Norman, if that is your name, I could look it up, but then that'd waste time and leave Ange sitting in silence. But if it was you, Ross, thank you. And that was really lovely, and you're a lovely man.
Was there anyone speaking on behalf of gay men or lesbians about there wasn't?
No, not once.
That's very surprising, because some of the most vocal people on social media are gay men and lesbians in defense of their own sex-based rights. So I'm very disappointed, because this you know, forced teaming of the alphabet is a very big, easy peaking point.
Well, and here's the thing. So Patrick Parkinson was a late addition. So it turned out there were 4 speakers who are against the bill, 4 groups of speakers who are against the bill, 7 in favour who spoke on the day. Again, bias, fucking bias. You could have had someone from LGBT Alliance come and speak. That would have at least evened it up a little bit more.
Yeah. I watched the submissions for the New Zealand bills because there was a degree of distance. And that's what I also found shocking, was the capture of the committee. The language that was used was the trans language. And they also had far fewer and also more moderated speeches that were against the bill than the ones that were for it. And all the 4 ones were based on, you know, as a trans woman and personal experiences, and all the ones against the bill were referenced, were more from sort of almost a sociological perspective, and yet they were dismissed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was
so it's predetermined. You know, the Queensland is just following the same pattern as Victoria, the same pattern as New Zealand, probably the same pattern as Perth or any other state that has self-ID, and certainly the same pattern as Scotland, because they're trying to introduce all of the same things we are, except they're facing far more opposition. And I had another person say to me, you know, hey, Ange, you're a women's rights activist. Have you heard about what's happening in Scotland? Isn't it terrible? And I said, what do you mean? What do you mean? It's happening here too. It's been impacting on women and girls for 3 years. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh, no, it can't be happening here.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
We know about it because it would be on the news is the big, we'd know about it because it would be on the news.
Yeah, which news are you watching? ABC every single night? Like, I can't believe that I am now speaking ill of the ABC. Because I was getting all my news from the ABC for many, many years. And then I realized that they weren't reporting on this. And what's more, they were like, I feel sick about the word queer being used. It makes me feel ill because, you know, I'm a boring heterosexual woman, but I know queer as a slur. I don't know it as anything else except in like a old-timey set in England novel that, it was very queer that happened. But especially for fucking spicy straights to appropriate the word queer and think that they can use it. No white people are appropriating the N word and thinking that they can use it. And yet these fucking heterosexual spicy straights think that they can use that word, and it really upsets me. And to see things like ABC queer makes me feel physically sick, and I can't imagine how it feels to gay men and lesbian women.
Remember them making all those apologies? Mon Schaefer had to apologise for misgendering a non-binary person. I think it was Alice Page or something. And then they apologised for using same-sex, the word same. Hamish used the word same-sex attracted at Mardi Gras, and they had to apologise for that. To me, that was just That's one of the most homophobic things that I've ever seen with my own eyes, and I'll
Yeah.
never forgive you for that.
No,
You
exactly.
know?
Exactly. And it's such a shame because to so many people, they still believe that ABC is neutral and center.
Yeah.
And it's fucking not. And I feel so betrayed and I feel really angry that that's not the case.
And
And
I
the
wonder if,
ABC has gone so far the wrong
yeah.
way.
Well, that Australian story of Dr. Telfer from the Melbourne
Ugh.
gender clinic is the one that that basically captured a whole bunch of fence-sitting Australians, and they believed everything that Telfer said because it was on that specific program on the ABC. Now we all know that she was lying.
Yeah.
So it'll be really, really interesting to see what happens when the CAS report comes out and in full, and the evidence is there that Telfer has known for a long time that the affirmation only program is problematic.
Yeah.
And has ignored, research and advice about that. She's ignored it. And it'll be interesting to see if the ABC acknowledges that they have, basically promoted that dangerous ideology.
Yeah.
And that has done damage to kids. So our national broadcaster, in promoting Michelle Telfer and the affirmation only model, has contributed to harm towards children.
Exactly. And then how about our fucking government? Because what I can't fathom is the arrogance of the Labor Party to forge ahead with this when the House of Cards is crumbling overseas in comparable cultural locations to Australia, such as Scotland and the UK. The House of Cards is crumbling. Why are you forging ahead? Are you that arrogant that you really think you're going to get away with this? And the
Yes,
thing
they
is,
are.
now it's all in Hansard. So when the Royal Commission happens into why there are so many breastless young girls walking around and so many, well, I don't think there's as much of a push towards cutting dicks off boys, but whatever, weird man booby situations on young men. There's going to be a Royal Commission into that, and it's going to be in Hansard that we all fucking tried to tell you. And even so, Rachel Wong even said in her opening address, this has been blocked in Scotland by the UK in an unprecedented move. And if they still forge ahead, it's like, well, we all warned you. The evidence is there. It's in Hansard. We all tried. Sal was given 5 days by the committee to provide a list of men who have done bad things to women while self-IDing as women. And it's like, well, sorry?
She would have needed 5 minutes.
Oh, well, she's so far got a list of 53 men, and she has made a really lovely spreadsheet. So hope the committee likes reading about disgusting men being disgusting. So, and she was only given 5 days to do that. So that's, fair and reasonable. But yeah, just the fact that the Labor government, and the thing is that what I've heard is that Fentiman wants to be Premier, and this will be her big move to hang her hat on and say, look what huge reform I brought in that makes me worthy of being Premier. So, but the bill isn't, I think it's slated to be introduced next year. I don't know if that would be before the election or not. So if the LNP can get in, they could potentially decide not to bring it in at all. But
see, it's a form of economic rationalism. Like, people go, why are they doing it when they know it's wrong? One, because it brings them money. But look, even if no kids were transitioned, right, they can replace all the sexed facilities with unisex, and it saves them a fortune. I used the toilets example on Twitter the other day, where I was in a country town yesterday, and they removed their 3 men's toilets and 3 women's toilets because they were dilapidated, and they replaced them with 3 unisex toilets. So instead of replacing 6 toilets, instead of replacing 6, they replaced them with 3 unisex, right? And the townspeople went to Bunnings and they bought a male sign and a female sign. They ripped 2 of the unisex signs off and they made male, female, and unisex.
Yes.
And now the town is happy.
Oh, mate, you don't fuck with country people, do you?
No,
They invented the pub test.
Yeah, and because I like chat to people as we're traveling around, and I heard the story and I was like, you beauty. And they see this desexing of society as a city thing infecting the country.
Yep.
Absolutely. Like a plague. And it is an inner city middle class thing. And the people making these decisions will never be impacted by them like country people, like working class people, like poor people, like imprisoned people. It will never impact them like it does us. And of course, who weren't invited to make a submission to this committee? All the people that are most impacted by it.
That was the point Rachel Wong actually made in her opening address. She said the people pushing to legislate this are the people who will never need to access a shelter, a service where the service or shelter being single sex is really important. It was so weird. Sandy Bolton, along with her little flight of fancy about everyone has to have a gender identity certificate, she actually said, but we all know that we've been sharing female toilets with trans people for years, and you probably wouldn't even notice. You probably wouldn't even notice that they're not women or that they're trans women. And it's like, either you need to go to Specsavers or you've never had a man in a woman's space, because you can fucking tell.
Yeah, and there's a big difference. Yeah, there's a big difference between going to the toilet in a nightclub and a drag queen's in there washing their hands, than going into a public toilet at a roadside stop or something like that, and there's a huge hulking man in a dress in there. There's a huge difference.
Exactly.
So, and you can always tell. You can always tell.
Exactly. And it's just so, like, a 2-year-old child can accurately sex people. Don't tell me, Sandy, that I can put a man in front of you, and if he calls himself Susan, you're going to be like, oh, you're a woman then. Come on, Sandy. Come on, Sandy, for goodness sake. So that was just weird. I think Sandy needs to maybe have a little cup of tea and a read of some stuff, because I was just like, did you not see the bloke from Sisters Inside? That is definitely not a woman. Don't tell me that, like, seriously.
I'm really glad they had him, because, and guys that look like him, the Roxy Tickles of the world, that is your typical trans-identified male.
Exactly.
A hulking bloke in a dress.
I'm sorry, but I really love the optics of Roxy Tickle as the poster boy for the TRA movement, because they would so not have picked him if they could have had the choice of who to choose. They would have chosen, like, Australia's answer to Katie Montgomery, some young, effeminate gay man who'd had facial feminization surgery in Thailand. Like, they would not have picked Roxy fucking Tickle.
Well, I'm glad he's out there, because he's reality. I'm glad he's out there representing his kind.
Yeah, good on him for being so upfront about himself. So, I don't know if you saw, but speaking of he, himself, he, man, the TRA who used your display picture accidentally referred to himself as he. I got a screenshot. I'll send it to you.
Really?
Yeah.
Excellent.
He referred to himself as he, and I was like, okay, so if anyone ever tries to get me suspended from Twitter for misgendering that particular man, I'll send Twitter that screenshot and say he calls himself he. Case closed.
Excellent. I might make that my cover photo. No, I won't do it. I get so tempted to sink the level sometimes, but then I go, no, rise above it. But it's fun.
Why do we have to be grown up?
We laugh. And we laugh about some of the antics, online, but this stuff is impacting women in real life.
Exactly.
And part of the reason that we laugh is if we don't, we'll cry, because it's devastating.
Exactly.
And the fact these clowns, and that's exactly what they are, they're clowns The fact these clowns wield so much influence is horrific.
Exactly.
It is. And they're just a front for what the government's trying to do in cost cutting and trying to, you know, claw back a lot of the money that they lost over, you know, since the economy's collapsed under COVID and things like that. So, you know, they're just like the smoke screen. They're pretending that it's about, you know, inclusion and making these, you know, marginalized people, you know, normal, but it's not. They're just a front for this, you know, defacing of society, commodifying bodies, commodifying women's sexuality, commodifying our reproductive capacity. Trans people are just the front.
And in Fentiman's case, vehicle for her ambition to become premier.
Yeah. Shannon Fentiman, oh, shame on her. She's just, what, you know, I don't know how she sleeps at night, to be honest. She must be a malignant narcissist, because that's the only kind of person that can impose something like this on vulnerable women and still sleep at night.
Well, the fact that Women's Legal Service and Sisters Inside are in favour of this bill. Women's Legal Service, who currently carries a Anti-Discrimination Act exemption in order to only employ female staff and only have female clients, that they're in favour of this bill. And I think, did you miss it, or did you see it, that Women's Legal Service blocked me on Twitter?
No, I didn't see that.
They blocked me on Twitter, and I wasn't even like that rude, or like I wasn't rude or abrasive to them at all. I wasn't even that forthcoming, really. All I said, I made 2 comments to them, one of which was, I'm sorry you're about to lose your single sex exemption. You do such fantastic work, and it's a shame to see your good work essentially going to be undone. And then another post was of a similar nature. It was basically, I'm really sorry that this is happening to you. And they responded by fucking blocking me. So yeah, great. And then I found out that the current principal solicitor there is totally captured. So of course she is. So it's
well, so that's your luxury belief.
I just keep imagining the free evening advice session where half the waiting room to see a family law domestic violence solicitor will be women who have had to probably fabricate some narrative to their abusive partner in order to escape just to come to evening advice, and the other half of people in that waiting room will be men. It's despicable. It's absolutely despicable. Where is your backbone, Women's Legal Service?
They already get prioritised for housing and things like that, the trans identified people, because, you know, while trans is meant to be this normal thing, you know, they use it to get privileges. It's, you know, it's like it's a disability when it suits them.
Yeah.
It's a disadvantage when it suits them, when they want to jump the housing queue, or when they want a disability pension, or when they want some sort of benefit. It's that violins come out and, oh, I'm trans and it's debilitating. Or when they've committed a crime and they want to get a light sentence. Oh, you know, but I'm transitioning, or it was because I was trapped in the wrong body.
Rapid onset prison dysphoria.
Yeah, there's plenty of that, you know. But then if you point out that, you know, I thought trans was not a disability and it was just a normal thing, and that, you know, a certain percentage of the population was born that way, then they're like, oh yeah, right. You know, they can't get their story straight.
Yeah, exactly.
It's made up, because the whole thing's made up.
Exactly.
Oh, exactly. Well, I feel grateful I don't live in Queensland, because I didn't have to sit through that. But I live in the worst state where this stuff's already happened and it's impacting on all of us. And this is re-traumatizing me, I guess. You know,
so sorry.
I'm just going to hop on Holly Lawford Smith's website and make a couple of submissions as to where trans-identified men have impacted me since we've had self-ID. Because, you know, I have been impacted personally a couple of times, and I urge anyone who has been impacted by self-ID to put a submission on that website, because that's coming in handy for things like when, you know, the states are rolling out these self-ID bills, so that there is like a record of how women are impacted.
That's excellent. Holly's such a legend. Good on her.
Oh, legend.
Thank goodness she's back on Twitter. So much easier.
Thank goodness she's in Melbourne. Yeah, and has she come back She's come back firing. And yeah, and she's a Melbourne turf. And you know, I honestly think that our country is on the verge of peak trans, because I can feel the rumblings. More and more and more people are coming to me, just, you know, disgusted with the way that this ideology dominates everything. Someone shared a photo with me this morning from the Invasion Day March in Melbourne, which is always a huge event to protest against Australia Day being held today. And it was a big trans thing with people with trans flags saying, you know, no pride in colonization or something silly like that, which was a bit of a hypocritical for them. But, you know, they can't, you know, Indigenous women people can't even have their own day without the trans making it about them.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. It would have been really interesting to know if anyone in that Pride invasion group was actually a First Nations person. I'm guessing not.
Well, you know, apparently it's racist to judge someone by their skin color, but no, they were white. So yeah, so look, I was away for 4 days and I came back and chaos, you know. Chaos.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want the Cliff Notes version of the hearing, you can, if you go straight to part 2 of the recording that's on the Parliamentary Committee website, then close to the start of that, you've got Sal and Rachel. Excellent. And then straight after them is Kakarina. And in that same part 2, there's Sisters Inside, which that's just a comedy, just an absolute comedy of like, maybe they'd make more sense if you were on some sort of illicit substance or if you were super drunk. I don't know if you know anyone who takes a lot of acid, maybe get them to watch it and they'll understand and then they can interpret for you. But it was just weird. Super weird.
And look, you know, your name says everything basically. You know, you have campaigned so hard over the last 12 months since this bill was announced as imminent. You know, and you have done a wonderful job in raising awareness about this self-ID bill, you know, like, thank you so much on behalf of all women, not just Queensland women. Because that little moniker of yours that's up on the screen there is you know, quite famous in Australia now. So yeah, well done.
Thank you so much. That's extremely flattering from Australia's preeminent turf.
No, I wouldn't say that. Amy Sargent's preeminent turf, but yeah. So, we've gone well over time, of course, because it's always interesting to talk about this stuff. Yeah. So if you're interested, particularly if, you know, you're worried that your country is going to impose self-ID, or your state, you haven't been through it yet, have a look at what's happening in Queensland. And, you know, because, you know, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So yeah, it's really worth having a look at, because there seems to be a formula that these governments roll out. And everything's going as I imagined. And it's going to be a case of us clawing it back. You know, we've got Kelly J's court tour coming up in the next few months. You know, we've got media agencies sort of trying to open the gate a bit about being more objective in their reporting of trans stuff. So let's see what happens in the next few months and whether Australia will peak trans. Let's hope that we do.
And let's keep seeing extraordinary women be extraordinary.
Speaking up, yes. Thank you so much, No Self ID, and I'll see you in the chats. Thank you everybody for watching and listening, and if you could like, subscribe and share, that would be fantastic. And I might actually be bringing you 2 episodes this week, but we'll also see you next week. So yeah, thank you so much everybody, and we'll catch you soon. Okay, then bye.
Bye.